When I saw footprints appear across my snow-covered driveway, I knew someone had walked there during the night. The problem was, the snow had not stopped falling until sunrise. I stood at the window, mug cooling in my hands, staring at the single trail of prints leading from the road to my front porch. They were deep, deliberate, and perfectly spaced, like whoever made them had not been in a hurry. My heart thudded harder with every second I stared. No car had passed. No neighbors were awake. The world outside was silent and white and still. I checked the time. 6:42 a.m. The snowfall report on my phone said accumulation continued until 6:10. Which meant those footprints were less than 30 minutes old. A cold feeling crept up my spine that had nothing to do with the winter air leaking through the window frame. I scanned the yard, the mailbox, the street. Nothing moved. No new tracks led away from the house. Only the path coming toward it. Toward me. I hadn't heard a knock. I hadn't heard footsteps on the porch. I hadn't heard anything at all. Slowly, I stepped back from the window and looked toward the front door, half expecting to see a shadow under it. The house felt different now, like the walls were listening. The ticking clock above the stove sounded too loud. I grabbed my phone and checked the doorbell camera app. The screen loaded. My porch appeared, covered in fresh snow. No footprints. I blinked and refreshed the feed. Still nothing. My breath grew shallow as I switched to the driveway camera. There they were. The prints. Clear as day. I stared between the live porch feed and the driveway view, unable to understand how one showed undisturbed snow while the other showed evidence someone had walked right up to my door. A notification popped up from the camera system, connection unstable due to weather conditions. I didn't believe it. Because as I stood there watching, one more footprint slowly formed in the snow on the screen. No person. No movement. Just the shape pressing into the white surface as if something invisible had stepped forward. I dropped the phone. Outside, the silence remained unbroken. Inside, I realized with a sinking certainty that whatever had walked up to my house during the night might still be standing on the other side of the door. I could hear my own breathing echo in the kitchen, too loud, too fast. The heater clicked on, making me flinch like a sudden knock. I stared at the doorknob, waiting for it to turn, praying it would not. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe, waiting in silence. I didn't go to the door. Instead, I backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the knob as if staring could prevent it from turning. The phone lay on the floor near my feet, screen still glowing with the frozen image of the driveway. Another footprint had appeared beside the last one. I forced myself to breathe quietly and picked up the phone again, half expecting the image to change. It hadn't. The print remained, sharp and undeniable against the white snow. My first thought was to call the police, but what would I even say? That invisible footsteps were forming outside my house? That my cameras disagreed with each other? I opened the app settings and checked the timestamps. Both cameras were synchronized. Both showed live feeds. Yet only one showed the trail. A soft creak sounded from the front porch, so faint I almost convinced myself it came from inside the house. I froze, listening harder than I ever had in my life. There it was again. A slow, careful shift of weight on wood. My throat tightened. I stared at the door as if expecting to see it bend inward under pressure. Without thinking, I stepped backward into the hallway, needing distance from the entrance. The house suddenly felt too small, every wall closing in with the knowledge that something stood just outside. I grabbed my keys from the counter, unsure why, only knowing I might need to leave quickly. But the only exit was the front door. I considered the back door, then remembered the yard was fenced and buried under deep snow. Another creak. Closer this time. My heart pounded so loudly I wondered if whatever was outside could hear it through the wood. I forced myself to check the porch camera again. The screen showed untouched snow and an empty step. Yet the sounds continued. A strange realization dawned on me slowly, chilling me more than anything else. If the camera couldn't see it, maybe it wasn't standing where I thought. Maybe it was closer. A faint shadow slid under the door frame, thin as a line drawn by pencil. I stumbled back, hitting the wall behind me. The doorknob rattled once, gently, like a polite visitor testing whether it was locked. I realized with horror that I had never actually checked the lock that morning. My legs felt weak as I moved toward the door, each step slow and deliberate. I didn't want to get closer, but I had to know. I leaned forward and turned the deadbolt quietly, the metal clicking into place with a sound that seemed far too loud. The rattling stopped immediately. Silence pressed against the door like weight, heavy and patient. I waited, listening, knowing something was still there. Outside. I stayed frozen near the door for what felt like minutes, listening for any sign that whatever stood outside had moved away. Nothing. No footsteps. No creaking porch boards. Just the faint hum of the heater and the distant hush of wind pushing snow against the house. My phone buzzed suddenly in my hand, making me jump. A notification from the camera app. Motion detected, backyard. My stomach dropped. The backyard was fenced, enclosed on all sides, with only one gate that hadn't been opened in months because of the snow. I slowly opened the live feed. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Just a smooth, untouched blanket of snow covering the yard. Then I noticed the pattern. Footprints. A single trail. Leading from the back fence, toward the house. My mind raced. That was impossible. The fence was nearly 6 feet high, with snow piled even higher against it from the plow trucks. No one could climb over it without leaving clear signs. Yet the prints were there, spaced evenly, identical to the ones in the driveway. And they were fresh. I zoomed in on the screen, my fingers trembling. As I watched, another print formed in the snow. No person. No shadow. Just the snow compressing downward as if stepped on by something invisible. I staggered backward, my shoulder hitting the wall. The realization hit me like ice water. Whatever had come to my front door was now behind my house. Or worse. Maybe it had always been there. A loud thud hit the back wall of the house, followed by a dragging sound across the siding. I gasped, dropping the phone onto the couch. The sound moved slowly along the exterior, like something running its hand across the wall as it walked. I covered my mouth to keep from making noise. It reached the back door. The handle shook once. Then twice. Harder. I backed into the living room, eyes locked on the door across the house, expecting it to burst inward. The glass rattled in its frame. The blinds trembled slightly. I wanted to scream, but fear had stolen my voice. Then, as suddenly as it started, the shaking stopped. Silence fell again. I stood there shaking, realizing with growing horror that every door to my house had now been tested. Like something was checking for the weakest point. I didn't know how long I stood there staring at the back door, waiting for it to move again. My arms felt numb, my fingers tingling from clenching them too tightly. The silence wasn't comforting. It felt watchful, like a pause before something worse. I forced myself to think clearly. Every door had been tested. Front. Back. That meant whatever this was had circled the house. Slowly. Deliberately. I grabbed the phone from the couch and opened the side yard camera, the one I rarely checked because nothing ever happened there. The feed loaded. Snow. Fence. Trash bins buried halfway. And then I saw them. Footprints. Another trail. Coming from the direction of the backyard, moving toward the front of the house. My breathing turned shallow. It was walking around the perimeter. Studying. I watched in frozen horror as the snow indented again. A new print appeared near the trash bin. Then another, closer to the corner of the house. It was moving in real time. I spun around, scanning the walls, as if I could see through them. A faint scraping sound drifted from the side of the house now. Not loud. Not rushed. Just a slow drag, like fingertips brushing along brick. I backed away from the windows, terrified that if I looked out, I might see something that the cameras couldn't. A thought hit me suddenly, sharp and terrible. What if the cameras weren't broken? What if they were showing exactly what they were allowed to show? And whatever this was, didn't count. My heart pounded as I looked toward the ceiling. The attic hatch was directly above the hallway. I had never thought about it before. Now, the idea that something could climb up there and wait made my skin crawl. A soft thump echoed from the roof. I flinched so hard I nearly dropped the phone again. Snow slid down the shingles with a heavy hiss. Then another thump. Like weight shifting overhead. I stared upward, breath caught in my throat. It had stopped testing the doors. It had found another way. I stood in the hallway, staring at the attic hatch like it might open at any second. My mind raced through every possibility, each one worse than the last. Snow sliding from the roof. A raccoon. Wind. None of it felt convincing. Because the thumps weren't random. They were spaced. Measured. Like footsteps. I grabbed a kitchen chair and dragged it quietly beneath the hatch, every scrape against the floor sounding far too loud in the stillness. My hands shook as I climbed up, reaching for the thin string that dangled from the ceiling panel. I hesitated. If I opened it, I might see nothing. Or I might see something I would never forget. Another dull thud rolled across the roof directly above me. I pulled the string. The panel dropped down with a soft creak, releasing a breath of stale, dusty air into my face. I winced and squinted upward into the dark opening. Blackness. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dust, revealing wooden beams, insulation, and nothing else. No movement. No sound. I exhaled slowly, almost laughing from the relief. Then the light caught something that made my chest tighten. A line in the dust. A long, shallow drag mark running across the insulation toward the far corner of the attic. As if something had crawled through there. Very recently. The dust was disturbed in a trail that hadn't been there the last time I stored holiday decorations. I knew that because I had complained about how thick the dust was. Now, part of it was cleared away. I leaned closer, shining the light deeper into the attic space. The drag mark ended in darkness I couldn't fully see. My heart pounded in my ears as I listened carefully. And then I heard it. A faint, slow movement. Not above me. Inside the attic. The sound inside the attic was so faint I almost convinced myself I imagined it. A soft shift. A light scrape. Then stillness again. I held the flashlight steady, trying to push the beam deeper into the darkness, but the angle from below only showed me wooden beams and shadows. My arms began to ache from holding the phone up for so long, but I didn't dare lower it. I listened harder than I ever had in my life. A slow exhale drifted down from above. Not wind. Not wood settling. Breathing. I stumbled backward off the chair, nearly losing my balance as my foot slipped. The attic hatch hung open above me like a mouth. Dust floated in the air, glowing in the beam of my phone light. I couldn't breathe. Something was in my attic. Something that had walked around my house, tested my doors, and now waited directly above me. I grabbed the chair and shoved it away, stepping back into the hallway. My mind screamed at me to run outside, but the memory of the footprints in the snow stopped me cold. If I went out there, I would be stepping toward it. The only place that felt even slightly safer was my bedroom. I backed into it slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on the hallway ceiling. A faint creak echoed overhead, following my movement. It was tracking me. Tears burned in my eyes as I slammed the bedroom door shut and locked it. I dragged my dresser in front of it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely push. Above me, the ceiling gave a quiet pop, like weight shifting from one beam to another. I crawled into the corner beside my bed, clutching my phone, unsure who to call. What would I say? There's something invisible in my attic? Another soft sound came from directly overhead. Then, very slowly, I heard something begin to scratch. Right above my bedroom ceiling. The scratching above my ceiling was slow and deliberate, like someone testing the surface with their fingernails. I stared upward, frozen in the corner of my bedroom, phone clutched so tightly my fingers ached. Each faint scrape sent a tremor through me. It wasn't random. It followed a pattern. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. Pause. As if something was mapping the space below it. I forced myself to stay quiet, barely breathing, terrified that any sound I made would guide it more precisely to where I was hiding. Then the scratching stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I counted seconds in my head, waiting for the noise to return. It didn't. Instead, I heard a slow, dragging movement above the ceiling, traveling from one side of the room to the other. Dust drifted down from the light fixture in the center of the ceiling. I watched it fall like gray snow. My eyes followed the invisible path across the plaster. It was directly over my bed now. Then it stopped again. A new sound replaced it. A faint tapping. 1, 2, 3. Right above the ceiling fan. Like knuckles knocking from the other side. My throat tightened. Tears slid down my face without me realizing. I thought about the attic hatch still hanging open in the hallway. I imagined whatever was up there crawling toward it, dropping down silently into my house. A sudden crash echoed from the hallway. I flinched violently, my heart slamming against my ribs. The chair I had left under the attic hatch must have fallen over. Which meant something had touched it. I stared at the bedroom door, half expecting to see the handle turn. But the handle remained still. Then I heard it. A soft, careful footstep outside the bedroom. Inside the house. The footstep outside my bedroom was unmistakable. A slow shift of weight on the hardwood floor. A faint creak that traveled through the house and settled into my chest like a stone. I stopped breathing entirely, afraid even the sound of air in my lungs would give me away. It had come down from the attic. It was inside. I stared at the dresser blocking the door, wondering if it would actually stop anything. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then came another step. Closer. I could hear the soft scrape of something brushing against the wall in the hallway, the same dragging sound I'd heard outside earlier. My mind replayed the footprints forming in the snow, the cameras failing to show what was there. I realized with a sick certainty that this thing didn't need to be seen to move. A shadow slid under the small gap beneath my bedroom door. Thin. Faint. But moving. I covered my mouth to stop a sob from escaping. The shadow lingered there for a long moment, shifting slightly as if something stood just inches away on the other side. Then, very slowly, the doorknob began to turn. I heard the soft click of the mechanism trying to open. The dresser trembled slightly as pressure pushed against the door. Once. Twice. Then it stopped. Silence again. I waited, tears blurring my vision, listening for any sound that would tell me what it was doing. Nothing. Minutes passed. I don't know how many. Eventually, the house grew so quiet that I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator down the hall. I stayed in the corner until exhaustion overtook fear. At some point, I must have fallen asleep without realizing it. Because when I opened my eyes again, sunlight was pouring through the bedroom window. And everything was still.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, Make sure to subscribe to Midnight Case File, like the video, and share it with others because more mysteries await you.